The spirituality of balance, the teachings of Edan. There are many spiritual systems of morals and ethics. From our point of view today, I think it is more difficult to understand what the morality and ethics of people were like before Christianity, that is, at the time of paganism, since we always look through the lens of Christian culture and at the thoughts of people before that. One must not underestimate the enormous influence of the dualistic morality of Christianity, Judaism, Islam and Zoroastrianism have had on our cultures of the world today. Even in the modern pagan religion, one sees very strong moral principles that are influenced by Christian thinking. Yet the pagans themselves are often not aware of this fact. I'm only saying this in the view of the fact that when I present here a different spiritual ethic, that everyone must be aware that we who are grown up in a Christian-influenced area must question many self-evident things. I take as an example something that is very common in some pagan circles, and that I heard very often in discussions when it came to the question of morality, for example, occult and magical practices. There are two ideas that are always present here: karma, and the idea that a person would receive triple retribution from the cosmic forces for something evil. I must clearly contradict both views here. There is no such thing. There is karma in a certain way, but karma means learning. But learning for what purpose? Who determines what is good or bad? Which elements of the definition of good versus evil are culturally shaped and historically and belong more to our wishful thinking than to cosmic reality? The morality of the cosmos, if I might put it that way, certainly has little to do with a small-minded human morality that is constantly changing in time, fashion and culture, or with the personal sensitivities of supposed justification or hurt that the individual projects onto the cosmos. Such notions, charming as they may be to a child's mind, have nothing to do with real spirituality and spiritual development. Also, the question why an evil or good should return to us 3 times is only due to the idealization of the number 3 in spiritual systems and lacks any logic. Origin of morality. The morality of the cosmos, on the other hand, is truly derived from 2 things alone: the way it was created and the goal of the existence of the souls which inhabit it. About the creation of the cosmos, I won't say too much here, except for some necessary basics. I called the spirituality above the spirituality of Edan, because my soul comes from Edan, and from the first era of my life I took most of my perception of the nature of the cosmos. Now people may ask or object, what do I care? I am not from Edan. I've never heard of this world. Why may he keep his morality and cosmology to himself? That may be a valid, if petty reply. I offer a cosmological view, and I hope its value proves itself. It is not really important in the end which specific idea one has about the creation of the cosmos in its entirety. But there are some basic lines which I would like to point out here, namely that there were 2 creations that took place one after the other. To understand this is of paramount importance for spiritual ethics. The fact that there was one creation before our creation has been talked about in many mythologies, religions and spiritual systems. So it is neither something new not generally outlandish. First of all, we have the present world, that is the world which is generally considered to be the world of duality, a world which is kept alive and developing by two complementary forces. How to understand these two forces is a cultural and personal thing. Generally, spread is the idea of yin and yang from the Chinese spirituality, which I find a meaningful view because it liberates us from the suggestive terms like light and dark, male and female, and so on, thus formulating the duality which leads our thinking about what duality is too early into certain paths. I've chosen my own terminology, which I always admit is far from perfect, but it opens a perspective which is very important to me, and it is why I called the duality the balance of chaos and order. Now, of course, the concept of chaos is interpreted in many different ways, for example, in mathematics or physics, and then, of course, also in everyday language as something fundamentally negative. I mean the duality here as the duality of chaos and order as a cosmological constant of our creation in the following way. Order is the principle of community, of logic and reason, of science and empiricism. It is the idea that everything should be governed by an equal and just order, according to the categorical imperative that everyone should act in such a way that their actions could become the maxim of everyone at any time. Chaos, on the other hand, is individuality, is emotion and feeling, is art and creativity. It is the surprising, the new, the change that comes from the unpredictable, and, morally speaking, the perspective that each individual has a unique path that is unequal to the path of any other person. These two principles, chaos and order, or individuality and collective, are basic forces or basic principles that permeate the cosmos of the second creation, this world, on every level. There can only be spiritual progress at all in the dualistic world when people both individually and collectively maintain the balance between these two forces and move upwards within the balance of these two. Evil, in this sense, is every overabundance, every excess towards one of the two sides. This can be chaos or order equally. The excess of chaos, for example, is the anarchy in which people have nothing in common anymore, and the famous war of all against all breaks out. It is an excess to let oneself sink into sentimentality, and to let the individual feeling flourish, to only and exclusively form a quasi-tyrannical standard to all things. On the other hand, the excess of order is easily imaginable through dictatorship, tyranny, uniformity, and the personal cutting off of the own emotionality and authenticity. The battle for the light. If we decide today spiritually, magically, or mundane paths to fight against the darkness, it is essential to really understand these connections. Otherwise, we will inevitably be led astray, and in the end only the excess of one is in danger of being replaced by the other excess, as it has been the case again and again in human history. So if you, either spiritually or as a mundane man of the world, decide to fight for the light, the good, then be clear what the mistake of the other side is, and what it takes to correct the mistake. Is it an excess of chaos or order that poses the danger that emanates from them? In this consideration of Edanic spirituality, or the spirituality of balance, good and light is all which promotes the balance of chaos and order, since light means to understand clearly, And here the nature of the cosmos in its entirety, while evil is not a part of an equilibrium. Evil is not a part of a balance. I emphasize this with great vehemence, because in our time, through a wrong understanding of the nature of balance, it has come to the point that many people believe that there is or should be a balance between good and evil, light and darkness. And this is a very serious error of thought. For how could it be that if a person commits 100 good deeds, for example, it must be so that in a sense of the cosmos another must commit 100 evil deeds to compensate? What sense could such a defined balance make? What cosmic sense of higher development would it serve if I had to go there and save the lives of 100 people and then shoot 100 people somewhere else to compensate? No. Light and darkness, good and evil are not the duality of an equilibrium. Light means the preservation of the balance, namely that between yin and yang, chaos and order, and all the other dualities minus the darkness, because the darkness means the destruction of the balance. The darkness is the non-understanding of the cosmos, the incomprehension of it, what the spiritual world is really like. And in this ignorance, this darkening of the mind, lies the destructive rebellion against the progressive and beneficial forces of the cosmos. Or in other words, evil is the imbalance, and not part of the balance. In the universe, all forces and all things have a purpose. So evil is, in the last sense, just something in the wrong place, in the wrong scale, a force that makes sense in another place, in another form, but it has gone astray in excess. In this sense, I hear myself often the accusation that I sometimes stand on one side and again on another, especially when it comes to political questions. But the reproach is based on a wrong understanding of the nature of the cosmos itself. Like every Edani and every adherence to balance, I will, of course, support the weaker side of the duality of chaos and order, in order to prevent the excessive domination of one over the other. And when it comes to politics, for example, I will speak for the collective at one time, and for the right of the individual at another time, as the situation requires to strengthen or restore balance. I said at the beginning that there are numerous myths and spiritual teachings that tell us that before our time of duality there was another creation that existed before that. The different religions and spiritualities disagree on the value of this first creation. In the Christian Jewish mysticism, it is generally said that the first world was characterized by a special holiness. And in the teachings of the Order of the Golden Dawn, for example, it is compared to the world before the fall and after the fall, in which it is said that the fall was more than a misconduct of two people. It was a catastrophic upheaval in which demonic forces were released, shattered and poisoned the lower part of creation. According to this perspective, which is also sometimes found in pagan myths, the first creation was a golden age, while today we find ourselves in a fallen, poisoned, inferior time, while other myths, especially of paganism, describe the primeval world as chaotic. We will take here, for example, the Germanic or Greek mythology, in which savage giants and titans ruled at the beginning, raw customs and primitive existence reigned, while the second new creation of the world by the gods who came into the world eliminated the old titanic order and in its place put the more harmonious, just order of the gods. I would like to point out, if I may, that it is not really relevant to me which of the two perspectives is correct. I know from personal experience as well as from my memory that the cosmos before the new creation was fundamentally different in a way that is today the dualistic creation. but I do not wish to deduce from this that one creation was better than the other. Both have their merits. Although the fact that my soul and my existence comes from the time before the division, before duality, naturally puts me at odds with the present world of duality, which I see as a weaker world, since the dependence on duality makes it much harder to maintain balance than at the time of the worlds of the continuum, where the souls were connected but each was in itself a whole, are not just part of a divided duality depending on each other. The first world. Edan. My home world, like many worlds, dimensions, universes, and levels of reality, was created in a time when duality did not yet exist. It is extremely difficult today when we live in a world of duality, and also because of the languages of humans have no words which can describe the state before duality correctly, to explain well and appropriately the life world of the non-dual creation. The first world, or as I often say, the old world. One could say that in the old world there was only the continuum. Of course there were differences, but there was no principle of forces which were divided, and in the division would have caused each other to oppose as a necessity, as it is the case in the world of duality, the second creation in which we live today. I can illustrate this with a simple example. The first creation, we know, 4 people or races. Those we call the Asians, the Maskim, the Igigi, and my own people, the Ardala. Every member of all the 4 races had the same gender, because the duality of male and female did not yet exist. Each being was a whole in itself. But when the worlds were split by the great cataclysm, this wave also took hold of the world of the first races, and they were forced to adapt to this new perspective. Therefore, it is today that all the ancients, the Maskim, all the Igigi, and all the Ardala are male, and have an energetic reproduction that is not necessarily based on the duality of sex, as we know in the dualistic sense. As a hint, it may also be said that there are, of course, races and people from the first creation who were defined as female at the time of the transition for whatever reasons, or who decided to be those themselves. The process is no longer explainable from today's point of view, because it is neither an act of will that the races would have decided to do at a time, nor was it entirely a fate that came over them. But as said, there are no words for it in the languages of man. As a distant echo, our myths and legends have races like fairies or mermaids, which are all female. This is a distant reminder of the meaning of the first creation. In order to understand the spirituality of Edan, it is necessary to know the basic categorical concepts of Edenite spirituality. These terms are from the language of the Ardala, and I have to use them here because there is no sufficient equivalent in the language of mankind known to me. The first term is the term of the Chatra. Chatra means in English about as much as net or network. This term of Chatra describes the nature or state of creation. So when we think of a net, like a fishing net, it is made of knots and strings that connect these knots. That is the network of the Chatra, that all beings and all phenomena are a node in a network where all things are connected to all other things. Nothing is isolated on its own, and yet each part has an individuality, a point in the world which is the point or the location where it belongs to. The spirituality of Edan is often called the Arachatra. Ara is the next term of Edan spirituality, and it means light. Light is to be understood in the sense as understanding, clarity, true knowledge in that sense that there is no separation between the knowledge and the knower, as it is the case in intellectually logical knowledge, but a knowledge in which the knower and the knowledge have become one, or connected. I comprehend something. I do not only deduce it as an intellectually abstract concept. This definition of light is also reflected in human spiritualities in the concept of enlightenment. So Ara is enlightenment, but what is enlightenment? There is, of course, only one way to know what enlightenment is, and that is, unfortunately, to become enlightened. Descriptively, we can say that an enlightened being stands in full Ara, so all things are illuminated to him, and all darkness or ambiguity is removed. He lives in perfect harmony of the point of the Chatra, which is his nature, undefined by the necessity of the cosmos. Ara Chatra therefore means to know and to understand oneself completely, in the sense of the above-mentioned duality of chaos and order, which are the two elements which made up the human being inside, and the two forces that move and hold the cosmos together, so that the enlightened one of the Arachatra is aware of all necessities for himself and the cosmos that surrounds him. The next term of Edanic spirituality is Bekathra. Bekathra means true alignment. It is a term that is related to the network of the Chatra, if you will. Bekathra means to be on the right path. So maybe not yet in a complete state of enlightenment, but on the right path to it. In a higher sense, Bekathra also means insight into necessity. Also, the telemitic true will is approximately congruent with the concept of Bekathra. It is a stepping on a path whose direction you find within you, and where your path is yours alone, not equal to any other path. That is your Bekathra. The darkness. Finally, we have the counter term to the light, the Ara, which is of course darkness, or it is called in Edanic language the Jugani. Jugani literally means as much as what is bent, what is twisted, crooked. It is the thought that people or beings have forgotten themselves, that is, they have forgotten who and what they are, what their Bekathra is, that is, which place in the universe is necessarily the right one for them. They are out of balance because they have forgotten who and what they are, and now they are the plaything of the cosmic forces, chaos and order. But because they have become alienated from their own Bekathra, that means they have darkened themselves, or were darkened in Jugani. They cannot keep their own way in the storm of the forces of chaos and order, and thus become a very dangerous pawn of excess. People who fall into the Jugani are at first lost by themselves, but they can, unfortunately, also become very dangerous, great powers in the world, because he who has forgotten himself can make others his servants by leading them to forget themselves as well. And this is the great power of Jugani in the world. So the fight for the light is not only a fight against the evil of imbalance, but also against the darkening by the Jugani, which enslaves people by leading them away from their inner light and true path, the Bekathra, and makes them forget their true divine and spiritual nature, because only when beings forget their spiritual nature can they be made tools and slaves of the will of others. Instinctively, all those who have fallen into the Jugani try to throw all others around them into the darkness of the Jugani as well, because the dark part of their soul still remembers what it was like to be in the light, and their self-betrayal hurts and offends them, which they perceive especially sharply when they are confronted by those not fallen into darkness. And all those who follow the light, whether as seekers or enlightened ones, they are not able to bear it, because it reminds them of their own fall and therefore instinctively strive to draw them down into the darkness in which they find themselves. This is such an overpowering impulse for them that it leaves almost all other endeavors behind, and the deeper a being is caught up in the darkness, the stronger it will strive to drag all other beings around into the same darkness. The spiritual as well as the worldly struggle for good and against evil is, in my opinion, most meaningfully presented in this perspective. All other spiritual as well as secular systems of morality are cultural and temporal in nature, which may possess truths and dignity in themselves, but without the overall understanding of how the cosmos is made up, they can lead us astray again and again into the excess of chaos or order, and thus ultimately again into darkness, renewing the Jugani again and again, instead of overcoming it. Therefore, there are no general, universally valid and always right ways of behaving to restore and spread the light and push back the darkness. Sometimes it may be the time to push back those who have fallen into the darkness and fight them with violence, because there are danger to plunge even more in people into the darkness, while there are other times where diplomacy and pacifism may be the ways and means better suited to other situations. Of course, there are higher powers, guardians of balance and guardians of light, as we may call them, gods, higher powers, or in any other way whichever suits you. Of course, these higher powers work to keep not only humans, but all late-born races of the cosmos in balance and light, or to lead them back to it. So we are never alone in this struggle, but we ourselves have to take action. There is no point in sitting back and saying, I don't have to do anything. I can't do anything. You higher powers may take over. This is hubris, on the one hand, and a foolish comfort that has nothing to do with virtue. Since the nature of the cosmos is that of the Chatra, the network in which we are all connected is the task of each individual in his or her place and nature to work in accordance with his or her own nature to ensure that the light spreads and is maintained in the network of the cosmos, and that the imbalance of darkness is pushed back. Nothing and nobody can release you from this duty because we all are equally part of the network of existence. Only when people have really understood these higher principles can they make the right decisions on the lower levels of human life, that is, in living, in politics, or in any other field affecting human life which will lead humanity as a whole to a higher level. We who came here from the first worlds a long time ago to teach you, at this time we end our being here in a final cycle, and the time when humanity will be on its own in this matter is now not far away. It fills me with sadness and also with pain to see how probably little we have been able to make you understand this perspective properly. But one day you will have to take over the helm of your ship all by yourself, and then swim or sink, as it will become the fate of all your kind, of your joint action. As long as my time here lasts, I will fulfill this task to the best of my ability. But after that cycle of returning here is completed for me, and for all of us, return to the remote regions of our original old world. Remember our words. Ilanito del Salam. Friendship and met again.